Hello and welcome, guys. This is my first ever attempt to stream on social media, so I feel a bit nervous right now, but hopefully it will be okay and we will see each other more often in the future. And also, this is my first ever attempt to record a video in English, so yeah, let's see how it goes, but I just feel a bit nervous about it. So, what's the idea of today's stream? You know what? I was about to ask. I was about to start a new coding project right now, and I just thought that it will be a great idea to make it public. So you will be able to see all my steps. You'll be able to see the whole process of creating a new app from scratch, and you'll be able to see all my errors, my bugs, how I fix these bugs, and you'll be able to ask me questions. So it should be fun, right? It should be fun. So yeah, let's start. What are we gonna build today? So I decided to build a personal finance and budgeting app because for now I'm currently use just the Google spreadsheets for my finance and budgeting, which is not quite convenient, and I also tried to use some special apps like, for example, Empower, but it also not really like useful for me because the target audience of Empower is the guys who lives in United States, because the only available currency here is US dollar, and it has integrations only with US banks, and because of that it's not really suitable for me. So I decided to make my very own and my very personal finance and budgeting app, and yeah, I'm gonna use all the modern tech stack. I'm gonna use the modern architecture approach, like domain-driven design, like CQRS, like event emitting, like the modern front-end frameworks. So hopefully it will be interesting, and hopefully it will be useful for you, and you will learn something new from that. Let's see how it goes. But for now, I'm planning to go live on every weekend. I don't know yet if it will be Sundays or Saturdays. Let's see. And each stream will be of about 2 hours length, and every half an hour I will stop the coding process. I will switch to chat and I will answer your questions and so on. Okay, so let's start. What are we gonna do? First, let's start our timer. Just not to forget. What is it? Okay, let's start with our timer. So, what we're gonna use? What tech stack we're gonna use? First, we will start by making a backend service for our application, and for the backend side, we will use I think the most powerful framework for JavaScript, which is Nest.js. It is the really great framework for building server-side applications, and I'm gonna use it now because it has all the necessary features. Like, it has a lot of like plugins and different stuff that will be useful, and I think, yeah, let's stick with it. Next, we are gonna build the front-end app, and I'm not quite sure about the tech stack yet, because I really used to make front ends using Next.js framework, but on the other hand, I want to learn something new, and I know that there is a Remix framework, which feels like really great framework for the web right now, and I saw a lot of like bloggers and a lot of videos on YouTube that really appreciates Remix framework. So maybe we're gonna try it. Why not? So it will be either Next.js or Remix, and we will see later. And I think that the last step will be building a mobile app. So mobile app, but for now I'm not quite sure. Maybe we will skip this. Let's see how it goes and let's decide later. So for today we're just gonna start a new backend application using Nest.js framework, and we're gonna install all the necessary libraries, and we're gonna just define the structure of our project. So let's start. I'm gonna open the IDE right now, and yeah, let's start. But before opening IDE, let's go back to the documentation. To start a new Nest.js application, we need to type this command in our console: nest new and project name. I'm gonna use. So let's first decide about the project name. You know, when I'm thinking about finances and budgeting, wealth management, I think about whale. So whale sounds kind of similar to wealth in my mind. So let's start with this name. Maybe we will change it in the future, maybe not. It doesn't really matter at all. So let's go back to our console. But first, no, let's create a new folder. Let's create a new folder. It will be whale app. And let's open this folder in Cursor IDE. So, where is it? And what I usually do, I create a new folder here, which is VS Code, and I'm gonna save the workspace inside this folder. So it will be easier for me to manage all the separate projects inside. So we just saved it, right? And now we can start a new Nest.js project by typing nest new whale backend. Enter. So which package manager would I use? I will use pnpm, and let's wait until it will be created. So the Next.js project is instantiated. Now we have a whale backend folder inside our workspace, and now let's switch to the newly created folder, whale backend, right? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add this backend folder to our workspace and remove the root folder from the workspace, so it will be much easier to manage all the files. So for that, I click add folder to workspace, choose whale backend, add, and now we have like the root folder and the backend folder inside our workspace, and I just remove the whale, the root one, like this. And yeah, it is. Let's make the very first commit of our project. So for that, let's put here initial commit, like this. Okay, so now let's remove all the unnecessary stuff. For example, I'm gonna remove the default controllers and default services. We don't need this. Let's remove this test too, and let's remove this from the app module, like this. And let's put everything from this test folder in the root and remove this test folder. But you know what? Let's not remove it. Let's rename it to tests. It's test s on the end. So all the application tests will be here. And for now it is empty, right? Okay, so what I'm gonna start with? I'm gonna start with defining a new prettier config, because I like to set it up for myself, and for that purpose I usually Google for the prettier config. Yes, this one. So I usually use this config because it's really like good for me and I really like it. So, and I use it for every project that I start. So let's just copy it and put it here. Okay, and we need to remove all these comments. We need to remove all these comments like this and like this. Remove. Okay. So let me quickly explain what I'm just done. So print width is now equals to 120. It means that Prettier will try to separate. Prettier will try to put line breaks when our line length will be 120 characters. And use tabs false. Use tabs is responsible for indenting the code with tabs instead of spaces. Tab width is 12, so it is number of like tabs per level of indentation. Trailing comma, it means that we are gonna use trailing commas for objects. So you will see, I swear you. Semi-true, it means that we're gonna print semicolons in the ends of the lines, and we will use single quotes instead of double quotes. I don't think that we will ever need these two lines because we are not working on React application. So let's remove this. Yeah, and we will always include parentheses in the functions, even if there is only one argument. So it's kind of like for the code consistency. Okay, we just set up our Prettier, and let's restart ESLint server because our ESLint is kind of connected to the Prettier config, and while we are changing the Prettier config, we need to restart ESLint server. And now let's continue with installing all the necessary libraries. The first library I'm gonna install is the configuration module. So to do that, I'm gonna add nest.js config module to our project. Let's open a console and type npm add nest.js config. Because you know what, usually people like prefer putting some .env files in the root folder and storing all the variables here, but sometimes it becomes a mess, right? Because you have all the different like variables from all the different systems that you use for databases, for like email servers and all the other stuff all in one file. It's not really convenient. That's why I usually prefer to create a separate config files inside the configs directory, configs folder, and to define each config separately for every system. Let's do this. Let's create a configs folder inside our src folder. And the very first config that we are going to define is the database config. database.config.ts. And let's export const database config, which will consist of type, which is the type of our database, Postgres. We are going to use the Postgres database for our project. Host, port, username, password, and database name. Let's quickly change these variables. Not now. Let's also define export const. I think it should be database path. Let me quickly check. Postgres connection URI, and it should consist of all these variables in one string. So the username, after that it will be password, host, port, and the database name. Okay, so far so good. So what else I want to do? I want to install a specific library for checking of the environment variables, because you know what, we don't have such library in the, we don't have such a functionality built in the nest.js. So basically we need to check if we have a host in our env environment, if we have a port, if we have a username, password, and a database. And if any of these variables are not exist in our environment, it means we should throw an error, because all these variables are required. To do that, I'm going to install the specific package npm add env dash var enpm. Okay, and now we can import get function from npm from env var package. And for example, for the host, I'm gonna get the host variable from the environment. I'm gonna make it required, and I'm gonna cast it as a string, right? So the same for the port, the same for username, the same for password, and the same for the database. Okay, great. So let's check. Host is a string, username string, password string, database name is string. But I want to define port not as a port number, but as a positive integer, like this. So all these variables are required. It means that if any of these variables will be missing, it means that we will get an error. It's just for the type safety. And now we need to include this config to our main module, main app module. To do that, we need to include config module like this. We need to import it like this. And let's see what are the available options to configure it. So env file path, So we're gonna ignore env file because all the configs will be in a controller. And let's put ignore env file true. What else? Is global true, because we want the configuration options will be visible through in the whole project, right? Is global true. And what else? We're gonna load our database configuration by calling load method, and it should be loaded from the database config. To do that, we need to make a default export default, and we need to define a namespace. So as I told you previously, each config will be in a separate namespace. So the database config will be in a database namespace. For example, email server config will be in email server namespace, and so on. So to define a namespace, we need to call a register s function, export default register s, like this, database, and we need to export our database config like this. Okay, so now we are ready to include it in our config module. We need to import it. Like this. Okay, great. So we've imported it, and we're good to go. Let's make our first commit. Not first, but let's make a commit. Setup config module. Great. So what we're gonna do next? We're gonna install a couple of libraries that we're gonna need in the future. The first one is event emitter, because we're gonna make, like as I told you previously, we're gonna use the modern architecture, modern tech stack, modern approach of building applications, which includes using the domain-driven design, which includes the event-driven architecture, which includes CQRS, which stands for command query responsibility segregation. I'll tell you about it in the future, but for now, let's just install all the required packages. First package is the event emitter. Let's include it. npm add event emitter, like this, and we need to include it in our config. To do that, we need to import event emitter module, event emitter module, like this. So let's check for configuration. Wildcard false is okay. Delimiter, new listener false, remove listener false, max listeners 10, which is okay for now. This one is okay. Yeah. So I don't think that we need to configure it. We are happy with the default configuration. And the second module is CQRS. We need to install Nest.js CQRS module. npm add CQRS module. Okay, and let's include it. CQRS module dot for root. By the way, you can ask me questions in English, you can ask me questions in Russian, so sometimes I will throw some Russian bad language, definitely, even if, especially when I'll get some bugs, so, but forgive me that. We've installed CQRS module, and let's see, do we need to make any adjustments? And I don't think so. Okay, let's commit. Event emitter and CQRS. Okay, so the next thing, and which is really important thing, by default, Nest.js comes with Express framework, which is great, of course, and it's really like popular among Node.js developers. But I want to replace Nest.js with more performance-oriented framework, which is Fastify. Fastify usually much faster than Express, and it shares the common API, so we can easily switch from one to another. And to do that, let's open documentation. There should be an article. Performance. Yeah, Fastify. So to replace Express.js with Fastify, we need to first install the required libraries, which are Nest.js platform Fastify and Fastify itself. So let's go back to our terminal. npm add Nest.js platform Fastify and Fastify itself. Click enter. Great. Now we should go back to the main file of our application and to make a couple of adjustments. First, we need to import this stuff from the package like this. We need to put an interface here after the create methods Nest Fastify application like this. What else? And we need to call new Fastify adapter. New Fastify adapter. Like this. Okay. What else? Let's replace the default port with 8080 because I usually run the front-end app on the 3000 port. So let's replace it and let's put a void here. Yep, should be fine. Do we need to do anything else? Let's check. Yeah, we need to call up listen, because as you can see, by default Fastify listens only on the local host, and as soon as we will run our backend service in the Docker service, we need to listen on basically every host. So for that we need to put 0.0 and so on after the port, like this. Now it will listen on every port, every host in our system. What else? I think we are good to go. The next thing, let's install Swagger module really quickly, and I will switch to the chat after that. Swagger. For those who don't know, we use Swagger for automatically creating the documentation of our API. So it is really useful. But I don't know if I remember how to install it. What is it? Ah, yeah, Swagger. Okay, let's install Nest.js Swagger package. pm add Swagger, and we need to configure it. But first, npm approve builds. Okay, yes. Okay, perfect. And let's include it in our configuration. So first we need to create a config. Let's see, maybe I have a default config already. Yes, I have. Let's I have. Так. So up listen. Yeah, let's put the default config here. So we need to call a document builder instance. We need to create a document builder instance, and document builder we need to import from this newly imported Swagger library. For that we call import. So we create a document. We bind the docs route to this Swagger, right? And after this we call up listen function to run our backend and to listen for all the requests on other endpoints. But also we want to enable shutdown hooks. We call these methods for the enable shutdown hooks usually is a great option if you run your Nest.js service in the cloud environment, for example in Google Cloud and like AWS. So we usually need to enable shutdown hooks for that. So we installed Swagger, right? We've replaced Express with Fastify. We've imported the required modules, which are config module, event emitter module, and CQRS module. I'm gonna commit now. Add Swagger, and I'm gonna switch to the chat. Let's see your questions. Guys. Можно и на русском. Да, можно на русском, конечно, Дулат. Я прекрасно понимаю и на русском, и на английском, поэтому как тебе удобно. Кому удобно говорить на русском. If you want to ask questions in English, feel free to ask questions in English. So I'm just gonna like I'm gonna broadcast to a wide audience, so it doesn't really matter what language you will use. So the question, what do you think about Nest.js for microservice backend? Do Nest.js support gRPC, and how many resources do it consume compared to Golang or Rust? Okay, so first, microservice backend. If you open the documentation for Nest.js, you will see that there is a whole article about using Nest.js for microservices. So Nest.js is definitely really good for microservices, and it is designed to use for cloud infrastructure and for microservices pattern. Regarding gRPC, yes, Nest.js supports gRPC. It supports both requests and response. I mean, was streaming and handling of the commands. So you could just read this article. There is a separate gRPC article here on use cases and examples. How many resources does it consume compared to Golang or Rust? It's hard to tell. I think it depends, because Nest.js comes with a lot of modules, but as you can see now, I have to install all these modules separately. So if I need gRPC, I install gRPC module. If I need CQRS, I install CQRS module, and so on. So I think in raw state, without any modules, it may be as fast as Golang. But you know what? In Golang, we have also a lot of different frameworks and different libraries. In general, I definitely believe that Golang is faster, right? But I don't know. There are some frameworks in Golang, and if you put a lot of stuff here, as I do now, if you put CQRS module in your Golang application, if you put event emitter module in your Golang application, it may be slow. Yeah, it will become slowly. It will become slower, right? So the same thing for Nest.js. In general, yes, I believe it is slightly slower, but it depends on your use case. It depends on what libraries do you want to use, what modules do you need for your application. So for my case, I'm not gonna really focus on the performance aspect, because I'm not gonna build the high load application. It will be just simple finance management backend for the front end. So for me, it's definitely okay to use Nest.js in my case. Regarding Rust, I don't have any experience with working with Rust, so sorry for that. I can't answer this question. Okay. You know what? Let's make a quick pause. I'll hit pause and I'll go back in 5 minutes. So see you later. Okay, let's continue working on our application. So usually the next step that I'm doing is setuping the context. So why do we need it? Because I want to assign the ID for each request, right? For each session, for each request, in order to log it in case of any errors in our application. So let's do this. So context. There should be an article. I believe context. Yeah. Execution context. No, it's not execution context. Let's see. There should be something like request context, something like that. Fuck. Yeah. Request scoping. And nope, it's for microservices. So let's see. I swear I saw this article somewhere here, but I don't see it right now. What the fuck? It's always like this. You are like starting the streaming all your actions and fuck, you're fucked. Streaming files, nope. Session, maybe session, nope. It's not what I'm looking for. I know that there is a library, so let's start from the other end. Yeah, and the library is Nest.js CLS. So maybe I can search for an article in a documentation by typing this library name, right? Right, yeah, here we go. Async local storage. So async local storage is kind of a new API in Node.js, which allows us to store some values in the Node.js environment. And there is a package, Nest.js CLS, and this package provides some kind of an abstraction on top of the async local storage, which we can use for our purposes, right? Right. So let's install it, Nest.js CLS, and let's go back to our cursor. npm add Nest.js CLS. Okay, hit enter. So what else do we need? We need to include CLS module. Let's include it here. CLS module. Okay. So we need to. There are different ways on how you can integrate this module, Nest.js CLS module, into your application. For example, you can use a middleware, you can use a guard, you can use an interceptor and decorator, and so on and so forth. So usually I just use a middleware, which is the most common way to integrate it. We need to put a config here, global true. Oh, what the fuck? Global true and middleware mounts true. What's wrong? Fuck, I'm stupid. Yeah, now it's okay. What else? There is a built-in option to provide an ID for each request. For that, we need to put generate ID true option. Generate ID true, but should it be inside? Yeah, it should be inside middleware. It should be inside middleware. Generate ID true, and we need to provide in which header we need to put this ID. Let's copy this and put it here. So first we need to make it lowercase because Fastify usually transform all the request headers in the lowercase, right? And we need to, let's replace UUID with nano ID. For that we need to install npm add nano ID like this. Okay, replace it with nano ID. Looks good. So we need to replace request. It's not request because we replaced express with Fastify, so it is a Fastify request right now. Fastify request. Like this. Let's run. This should be typed as string. Okay. So now each request will have its own unique ID in the request headers, and we can easily debug everything if something goes wrong. What else do we need to do? Maybe, you know what, maybe let's keep in the request too, in the context too. To do that, we need to create a new interceptor. Let's copy the content of this file and let's go to our folder. Let's create a new folder, libs. Inside libs, let's create an application folder, application. And inside the application folder, let's create a new one, which should be context. Fuck, let's run. Context. Yes. And I'm thinking, no, let's name it not context, but interceptors. Interceptors, because we definitely will need one more interceptor for intercepting the errors. So for now, inside interceptors folder, we'll create ip.interceptor.ts and paste the content here. It will be IP interceptor, which implements nest interceptor interface, right? It is injectable, right? And we will need CLS service like this. What else? Execution context. Let's include everything and import everything. It is observable. Nope. What the fuck? It's not observable. Observable should be imported from CQRS RxJS package. Context request user IP request connection remote address. This CLS set IP. First, we need to define our context folder. Let's create app request context interface and export it. Export interface app request context like this. We will have an IP, user IP in our context, and we will also have yeah, that's it for now. That's it for now. but we will use this interface here in CLS service. App request context, like this. What's wrong? Oh, fuck, I forgot. App request context should extend CLS store, like this. Okay. So this CLS set IP we insert user IP, but there are some errors here, right? Let's use cursor chat for that. Refactor this interceptor. Let's see what cursor show us. Maybe it will have some good suggestions how to improve it. Get request. We need to provide Fastify request here because we now use Fastify adapter. Fastify request. I agree with that. So the first error is gone, and the second error, we need to extract user IP, right? Let's copy this. Let's copy this, and what cursor suggested us to do? So first we define the private methods extract IP, which will get the request, and it will return either a string or null. So first we check the header x forwarded for, if there is a header, and yeah, we just extract the IP address and return it. If there is no IP address in x forwarded for, we get the IP address from request IP, or from not only request IP, but also we can check for request connection remote address. No, not request connection. It should be here. Why the fuck there is no fucking connection here? I don't fucking know. Request IP. What's wrong? Fuck. Maybe raw. Request IP. Coming message. I'm not quite sure. Okay, let's see. Fuck it anyway. Let's see. And like the last step is we are just calling the validator, which is another private method in our class. We're calling validator and check for if it is IPv4 or IPv6 IP address, and if it's okay, we return it. So user IP should be taken from this extract IP, and user IP is null. Okay, let's make it like this. IP, which is string or null. So it will be always defined, but it will be either string or null. Okay, we're good to go. So this is the first interceptor that we will need, which will take the user IP address from the request and put it inside the context, right? And the second interceptor that we will need is exception interceptor. Basically, we need to catch for all the exceptions in our application and log every exception, and we also need to transform the exception to the common form, right? So let's try to make it. So first we need kind of the base class for our exceptions. Let's quickly make it. Inside our libs folder, let's make another folder, DDD, which stands for domain driven design, where we will keep all the common like abstract classes for our domain driven design models. Let's start with but maybe, you know what, exception definitely doesn't relate to domain driven design. Let's keep this folder for now, but let's create one more folder which will be for exceptions only. Exceptions like this, and we need to create a couple of classes. First of all, there should be a base class for our exception dot base dot ts. Okay, so let me quickly copy the base class from my example. Okay, copy and paste. So what do we have here? We have a base class which is exception base, which extends the generic error class, right? We define an abstract string for code, exception code here, and we also have the read-only correlation ID. Correlation ID will be our request ID, which we set up earlier, right? And we also have a method to serialize this exception to JSON. So yeah, let's remove all these comments. I took all these comments from the really good repository which I use all the time. It's called domain driven hexagon. You can search for GitHub for domain driven hexagon, and there is a great example of using the domain driven design and the like layered architecture for Nest.js applications. Just Google for not Google, search for domain driven hexagon repository in the GitHub. So basically I just copy pasted this class from here, but we need to make some adjustments. We need to make some adjustments because we are using Next CLS library, and we need to get this request context. So this exception class is kind of outside of the Nest.js dependency injection scope. That's why we need to get the service differently. Let's call for CLS. I don't quite remember. CLS manager maybe. Yeah, CLS service manager dot get CLS service. Write this. So let's rename it to CLS, and the correlation ID will be CLS dot get ID, like this. Yeah, we are good to go. So we have a base class for our exceptions. Let's create also exception codes. By the way, I made a typo here. Exceptions with C. Yeah, let's finish with our exceptions, and I will switch the chat. Exception.codes.ts. Let's copy exception codes like this. So there are several like generic types for our exceptions: argument invalid, argument out of range, argument not provided, not found, conflict, and internal server error. These are like the 90% of all the exceptions in our application. So let's define them here. And we also need to make a concrete implementation of these exceptions, because our exception base class is an abstract class, right? And we need to create all the like concrete implementations of the exceptions that we put here. So to do that, we need to create a new exceptions file. Exception. What the fuck? Exceptions.cs. Sorry for my bad language. If you are under 18 years old, please stop watching me, because I use bad language a lot. It is definitely the one of one of the most important things for a programmer. A good programmer swears a lot. I hope my mom doesn't watch my stream. Okay, let's import all these exceptions from the exception codes like this. We import exception base. So we also have argument invalid. So these are for each of these exception codes that we defined earlier, we created a separate class which extends the base class that we created like earlier. And so, for example, we have argument invalid exception, which basically just put like concrete code and extends the exception base class. And also we have argument not provided, which put this code, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we've defined all the classes, exception classes for our exceptions, right? And now let's just export everything from this folder. Export from everything from exception base. Export everything from exceptions. Export everything from exception codes. And I'm switching to the chat. Let's see what we have here. So far no questions. I don't know if it's okay or not. Please feel free to ask any questions for me. And also, please provide me some feedback. What should I improve the next time to make it better for you? Because I really want to make it useful, and I really want you to watch my tutorial, right? So I want to make it valuable for you, first of all. So please give me a feedback. It is super important. Okay, so there are no questions for now. That's why I just hit pause. I paused the stream for another 5 minutes, and we will continue implementing the basic structure for our Nest.js backend for our finance management application. See you soon. Okay, let's continue. We have not much time, so the half of the stream is gone. So we have an hour left. So let's continue. We just implemented our exceptions, base exception class and exception concrete implementations of our exceptions, right? And what we are doing previously? Yeah, I remember. I want to create a new. Sorry, let me check. I want to create a new interceptor. So we have one IP interceptor. It is the first interceptor that we're going to use in our application, which will take the user request IP address and put it inside the execution context, right? And the second interceptor that we need is the exception interceptor ts. Yep, like this. So let's define it. For that, let's copy the basic structure of the interceptor from here, right? I hope you can hear me, guys, because please, if you watch me, I hope that there's nothing wrong with my sound. And let me quickly check OBS. Yeah, it should be okay now. But if there are any issues, please let me know. I'll try to resolve this. So exception interceptor, let's remove everything from here. We don't need IP address extracting because we already have it. And let's remove. Not this. Remove like this, and it will be not IP interceptor but exception interceptor. I made the same typo once again. Exception interceptor. Okay, so let's go. What do we need to do? Let me quickly check my template. Exception interceptor. So yeah, let's first define a logger. Private logger equals private. Sorry for that. Private read-only logger equals new logger. Yes, exception interceptor name. So we've defined a logger for this class. And what needs to be done next? We have a CLS service here, which will help us to extract and put the data into the context. What else? We need to define intercept function like this. Let's remove the type definition here because usually I struggle to put correct type definitions, to be honest. So what needs to be done? Context. I think we will not need this. So let me open the documentation. We need to define the interceptor. Let's open the interceptor documentation here. And so what interceptors do? The interceptors will take the inbound requests, put it through the request pipe, and we can make everything with the request during this pipe workflow. It's hard to explain. It's definitely hard to explain. Let me quickly implement it. I'll swear it will be much more. You will get it better if I will just implement it. Sorry for that. So we'll define the intercept function here. Inside this, we need to define nest.js pipe, which is next.handle.pipe. Next.handle.pipe, and inside this pipe we need to work with our exceptions. So first we need to catch all the errors. And make it go through our pipe. Right? First we need to log the error. For that, we need to check the status. If r dot status more or equal of 400 and r dot status less than 500, we need to log it, right? We need to call this logger dot debug. This logger dot debug, and let's put error message here. Let's put error message. Let's make it beautiful. CLS dot get ID to get the request ID, and we need to put error message too here. So error dot message. So this is the first step. We check if the error status is equals or greater than 400 or and less than 500. We just log this error message inside our console, right? But as you can see, this error is not typed correctly, because for now this error has type of unknown, I believe, or any. What is error? It should be any, I believe. Yeah, and we need to correctly type it. So it is next exception, something like that. Next exception. HTTP exception. Yeah, HTTP exception. So HTTP exception should has all these statuses, but this property is private. This property is private for exception. This property is private for exception. You know what? Let's maybe ignore it for now. It doesn't matter if it's private or not. It's just one use case, just one interceptor. Nest.js is private and all. Let's ask AI. For fucking sake, we have a bunch of LLMs right now, so let's use it. Let's use it. Property status is private and only accessible within class HTTP. Fucking, what the fuck is going on? What the fuck is going on? HTTP exception. Let's see. Come on. Fucking stupid dumbass. I need exception interceptor here. Exception interceptor here. And the exception. The problem is that the status is private field. So what's going on? HTTP exception. Okay. Let's see. It just adds one more check if error is instance of HTTP exception. If error is instance of HTTP exception, which makes sense. Which makes sense. So let's if error, but it doesn't resolve the issue with private field. It doesn't resolve the issue with private field, right? It's bullshit. It's bullshit. That's why all these fucking ChatGPTs, copilots, and like any other LLM that we have now will not replace programmers, because it can hallucinate, right? So I think we just need to disable the ESLint rule. Let me quickly check how can we do that. I should open my other project. I don't quite remember which exactly ESLint rule we need to disable. Let me quickly open my other project. Fuck, it's stuck. Okay, fuck it. Anyway, let's continue working on our application because we don't have much time, right? Let's just continue and hopefully we'll resolve it later. Okay, so we call catch error function. We log error in case if the error status is between 400 and 500s, right? And we need to check if it is the class validator error. So const is class validator error equals. First we need to check if it is an array dot is array. We put a response message here, but first we need to, I'm thinking, fuck, I'm thinking, you know what, let's do the following. Let's first, yeah, I know, yeah, const error status, so we'll keep error status here, and we will extract it from private field by calling getStatus method, right? Yes, and we will also keep error response by calling getResponse methods. So now we can access private fields in the HTTP exception class, and we keep these values here. So it means that we can replace r.status with rStatus, I believe. Yes, exactly. And now we need to check if response message is an array. But first we need to check if it is a message or if it is an object. Response dot nope, type of so there are two options, right? There are two options. It can be either string or object. We assume that it is an object, right? So for that we need to check if type of error response does not equal to string, right? Property message does not exist in type object. So it is any. It is any right now. It is any get response specify response, right? No. Fuck, I don't quite remember how I implemented it previously. Let me quickly check. Let's quickly check. So how I've implemented it previously. So basically the response, it is a record of string should be a string or the array of strings, an arrays of strings, right? So if the error response, this is not useful now, right? And yep, we basically need to check if error response message is an array or not. We are checking it, right? So after that we should check if type of error response dot error equals to string, so like this. Okay, and we also need to check if the error is error status equals 400. So it means we have a class validation error, right? What's wrong here? Yeah, okay. So in case if we have a class validation error, we need to transform it to our like standard exception response, right? So to make it possible, we need to first create a new bad request exception, right? And inside this bad request exception, we need to put the error response, which we not implemented yet. So let's do it. Let's do it. So inside libs folder we will create API folder, right? And inside API folder we will create an API error. What the fuck? API dash error dot response dot ts, and here I can just copy paste the code for my existing project, right, like this. So basically we define the DTO, I mean response for our exceptions. This response will contain status code, message, error, correlation ID, which is the request ID, and any subset of errors for tracing and debugging. Okay, so we defined our class for API error response, and now we can put it here. We need to create a new API error response like this. So, and we just need to fill all these variables here. The first variable is status code. Status code, it is error status, which we already have. Message is validation error, which is good. Error is, let's take it from error response dot error. Error response dot error, but we already know that this is a string, so we can cast it as a string right now. Correlation ID we are taking from our context, right? Sub errors, error response dot message as an array of strings. Okay, so I think we're good to go. What's wrong here? Type void. So we need to return something. And we just need to throw an error. return throw error function from RxJS, and we return an error here, like this. So yeah, the type error has gone. But what else do we need to do? We need to check, because sometimes it may not be a class validation error, right? If this is not a class validation error, we just need to put a correlation ID inside our exception and basically throw it. So for that case, we need to define, so the error is HTTP exception with correlation ID field, which is optional, and it should contain a string, right? Like this. And now we can do the following. We can check if there is no correlation ID in the error. We just put correlation ID from our context, right? And we check if there is no response. If err.response, if error response, we already have this variable. If so, err.response dot no, error response dot correlation ID, error correlation ID, yeah, like this. So that's it. Basically, we lock our error, right? We check if it is a class validator error. We will install class validator a little bit later. If there is a class validation error, we just construct a new error response. And if error does not have any correlation ID, we put it from our context. And we put also the correlation ID to our error response. And we basically throw it away. Okay, we're good to go. So we have two exceptions. Two interceptors. One for exceptions, one for the user IP. Now we need to inject these interceptors to our Next.js environment first, and we need to catch for class validator exceptions. Let's start with class validator exceptions. It will be a bit easier to do. So to do that, we need to use a global pipes. So let's put one more line here. App.use global pipes, new validation pipe. So yeah, now we can check for class validation errors. Transform true whitelist true. Okay, but now you know what, I think we will need to install a couple of more libraries, a couple more packages to our project. So let's quickly try to launch our application. npm run start dev. Yeah, there are a couple of errors. What's going on here? db host is a required variable, but it wasn't set. Yeah, that was I was talking about. So in our context, in our config file, we are setting the required variable, but basically we just didn't get it anywhere. So we need to resolve this issue first. To do that, I'm thinking. So we need to definitely create a env local file to define local variables here, right? For now, let's just copy these variables. So db, what is it? db host, db port, db username, db host. db port, db username, and well, db password. Like this, and db database, db database, like this. So for now, let's just put localhost here, port number 5432, which is the default Postgres port, db username whale, db password whale, db database whale. So just for testing, let's check if this resolved or not. I believe not, because we know where extract these variables, right? Yeah. So we need to get these variables into our like environment context. We need to put these variables here. Let's make one more pause. I will switch to the chat here right now. I'll answer your questions. So there are no more questions for now, which is fine. And let's quickly provide these variables. And I will make a quick pause, and we will like finish our integration of our interceptors. So what we need to do? You know what? For now, let's just. It doesn't make any sense. I'm thinking. Okay, I know what. Fuck it. Let's install the new package, npm add.env. So basically, I can tell you what I was thinking about. So we have this config module. This config module can read our env files, right? But it doesn't make any sense because we ignore env files, right? We want to ignore it because we want to define the configuration through separate files, and that's why I don't want to include env files here. But on the other hand, we still need to get some variables from env files. I just created the env file for local testing, env.local, right? And now we need to retrieve all the values from here. To do that, let's create an utils folder inside our libs folder. Utils, and inside utils we will just put .env.ts file. Let's quickly copy from the other project. So yeah, we need to initialize.env by providing a path to our env file, right? So it should be env local, like this, and no, env.test and env.local, like this. So we can define a separate file to contain the env variables specifically for testing, but for now we try to get all the variables from env local file, which we already have. That's okay. Let's try to insert it here in our config file. Where is our config? Database config. Okay, let's try to include it here. So we need to add import. Basically, we need to provide a path to the .env file. Yeah, like this. Okay, let's try to launch it, and if there are any issues, we will fork it and we will put env files directly into the config module. I don't want to do that, but on the other hand, I want to finish implementation with interceptors and not to deal with these env variables. It doesn't make any sense. pnpm run start dev. And yeah, db host wasn't set. Fuck it. Fuck it. Oh my god. What's wrong? Maybe something is wrong with the path. Yeah, something is definitely wrong with the path. Okay, let's remove .nfts. I don't want to waste my time by implementing this shit. We will do it later, definitely. Let's just put some app module. We don't want to ignore env file, right? And we want to, let's call it .env. Fuck it. .env, which is the default name for the env file. Okay, let's maybe restart the application. Fuck, one more error. What's wrong? db host is required, but why? Why? For fucking sake. Oh my god, I want to finish. So, custom config files, right? Right, so we just get the configuration from here. Custom env files path. Let's provide custom env files path. It is global, right? It is global, so we don't want to ignore it. We just need to provide custom env file path, which should be either env or env.local, which makes sense, right? But it should be the other way. First we try to find local file, and after that we try to find the just a common env file. What's wrong with file path? Custom env file path is not why? Ah, no, it's not custom, it's just env file path, right? For fucking sake. The host is a required variable, but it wasn't set. But why? It should be set. It should be. Okay. Something's definitely wrong with my so .env.ts. Let's start from scratch. We can copy it from my other project like this, put it here. So env path, yes, path.resolve dir name, yes, path.env path, env.test or just env, which is okay. Should be okay. And inside database config, we need to put it here. We need to import this file from leaks utils.env like this. We still got an error. What the fuck? Okay, let's deal with it later. You know, it's the end of the second hour of my live stream. I'm a bit overwhelmed. So for now, let's you know what? Let's do the following. Let's remove our database config for now. We will definitely need it in the future. Yes, and for now we just need to install all the required packages. First of all, it is Fastify static. So npm add Fastify static, right? Okay, let's try once again. We also need class validator package. Okay, let's install it. npm add class validator, which is great. npm approve builds, right? Okay, yes. Okay, let's try again. Start dev, class transformer, npm add class transformer. Okay, let's try once again. And now hopefully it should be, yes, successfully launched. Perfect. We resolved all the errors, and now if let's check how our Swagger looks like. So we need to open the docs folder. To do that, I'll open my browser. I'll go to localhost 8080/docs. Yeah, our backend is running and our Swagger is running too, but there are no operations, of course. We still have no endpoints in our application, but it works and it's great. So it means that we integrated all the global pipes, right? We've put the exception filter here and we put the IP interceptor filter here, right? We still need to resolve the issue with the config, but I hope that we will make it soon. Let's you know what, for now let's make another pause for another 5 minutes and let's finish and let's call it a day. Yeah, let's finish our integration. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, let's finish today's tasks. So we need to the only thing that needs to be done is to include all these newly created interceptors to our application, right? So to do that, we may include these interceptors on the application layer. How can we make it? Is by defining the new constant for interceptors. Yes, it is an array, and we need to include here two things. First of all, yes, exactly. Thank you, Copilot. Yes. So we need to provide app interceptor because we need to define these interceptors on the application level, right? The first interceptor we want to apply is IP interceptor, and the second interceptor is our exception interceptor. Exception interceptor, right? So as you can see, there are no issues for now. And let's just put all these interceptors inside providers array. Yes, and it's okay. Yeah, I think we're done. We've created two interceptors, and we inject these interceptors on the application level. Let's you know what? Let's commit our work. So what has been done? So interceptors, up interceptors. Yeah, okay. So there is still an issue with our config, and I don't know yet for now how to resolve it, to be honest, because it's a weird error, and I'm just gonna resolve it offline. So let's quickly sum up what have we done today. Today we've scaffolded our Nest.js application for our backends of our application for our finance management and budgeting application. So what we've done, we've configured config model for retrieving configurations. We've created the database configuration, which we're gonna use later. We've also integrated CLS module, which allows us to retrieve some data from the request and put it to the application context to use it. For now, we just generate the unique IDs for each request for logging purposes, and also we've created two interceptors on the application layer for extracting the user IP address and putting it into the context. We also created the exception interceptor, which basically logs every exception into the console and making this exception to a standard API response, which we also defined. And we also injected two modules that will be useful later. These are event emitter module, and this is secure RS module for event emitting and for command query segregation. So yeah, I think we can call it a day, and thank you for watching my stream. And the next stream, I think it will be on the next weekend. So see you later. Please provide me your feedback, put some comments, click like and subscribe button. So see you later. Bye.